tours, GravesideParanormal.com, Graveside Paranormal on YouTube. How's everybody liking tour tonight? Adam, are you here? Talk to us.
Hello everyone, this is Neal with Graveside Paranormal. We are presenting you Spirits by the Graveside. Tonight's date, July 31st, 2020. We are bringing you Spirits by the Graveside. And what we are going to be talking about tonight, we are going to be talking about mind control. MK Ultra, if anybody's ever heard of it, and we'll explain it. And then we're going to get into the second half of the show. We're going to talk about aliens. We're going to get into a brief part about aliens, and next week's show we're going to continue on. This show tonight is probably going to go over our usual hour because we have a lot of things to talk about. I think you're going to find the subject of MK Ultra a very interesting subject. But like always, let's start us off with the right thing. Grab your favorite glass and drink. I've got mine. Give that thing a little turn. Get it to breathe. You got to get it to breathe, man. Give it some breath. Take that first sip. Welcome to Spirits by the Graveside. I am your host with the most. Tonight we're not going to talk about a ghost. We are going to talk about MK Ultra. Let's start off with MK Ultra. Well, before we start with MK Ultra, actually I wanted to talk about what we did last week. We did a live show from the Sally House in Atchison, Kansas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you right now, that house there is very real. We're going to have the documentary hopefully out by at least October or November. Steve's on the other line. Steve, would you say we should have it out by October, November?
Yeah, hello everybody. Yes, I think by October is safe to say, maybe a little before that. That place is pretty darn haunted.
Yeah, that place there, I've never experienced anything that powerful. You can feel the presence of something trying to get inside you, and I don't mean to sound in a weird way, but you can feel the presence, and what it does is it wipes out your energy. I mean, it really, really wipes out your energy. I had to take an hour nap during it because I was completely drained. For you guys and girls who were watching the live videos, we do appreciate that last week. Michelle, she caught some things by reviewing the live. Supposedly, we got some disembodied voices. In the second video where we're live, and I think it was after 10 o'clock, at 20 minutes and 15 seconds, after I say, Steve, can you hand me the EMF, please? You hear something that sounds like, yeah, meeting Pete, or yeah, EVP. Now, what we want you guys and girls to do is, we want you to go back there and you tell us what you said. I mean, what this thing said.
What you hear.
What you hear,
right.
I'm sorry. What you hear, and give it back to us. Either email it to us at gravesideparanormal.com or Steve at gravesideparanormal.com, or you can just hit us up on an instant message. Once again, that's at 20 minutes and 15 seconds. There was also another thing of a loud voice on the second video at 39 minutes and 28 seconds. Supposedly it was originally on the Anahata, but then Michelle believes she heard the same thing, but it was not the Anahata. That place there, I definitely want to go back to again. Once again, it's a very real place. It was just totally crazy. Steve, what would you say?
Very crazy. And, you know, just to add to the Facebook live stream, listen to it, folks, and let us know what you hear. I actually found something on the Anahata when you were in the master closet, Neal.
And we can't say this on Facebook.
I won't say it on Facebook, but if others want to review that portion of our Facebook Live, let us know what you hear, and curious if they come up with the same thing. We may add that in our video, but it was a pretty vulgar response to you, Neal.
Yeah, it's something we can't put on Facebook today, but that's all good. We're going to put it on the YouTube thing, and I'm sure I'll get away with it. Hey, you know what?
But that whole night was creepy.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, the energy in that place was completely nuts, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Steve, I'm looking at the Facebook. There's a Richard Reagan. Hey, guys, from the UK. I'm like, wow, hey, check you out.
Oh, hey,
that's awesome.
from the UK.
And thank you for everybody else who's watching, of course. But let's get right into the show, shall we? Let's talk about MK Ultra.
Yes.
So, supposedly the origins of mind control actually started off in Nazi Germany. Was one of the first to start mind control experiments. Supposedly, after some time after the fall of Nazi Germany, the American government decided to take some of these scientists and they adopted them basically to help them with mind control because Nazi Germany was doing that. There was a memo that came out, it was in June of 1951, from the CIA that said scientific methods for controlling the minds of individuals. Why would they put that out there? Now, that was 1951. Now, Steve is someone who does hypnotism. Now, Steve, I want you to talk a little bit about hypnotism and how it could probably affect maybe mind control.
I'd say that hypnotism is at the low end of mind control. I like to think of hypnosis as self-hypnosis, even if it's guided by somebody, right? Mm-hmm. You have to kind of be willing to allow it to work. And so I kind of think of self-hypnosis is something that you have to allow to happen. It's not like the stuff we're going to get into tonight where somebody actually controls your mind. I'd say that hypnosis is more of like a way of getting self-control. Mm-hmm. What we're going to talk about is way deeper than that.
Yeah, it's notorious. Mm-hmm. It's downright evil. Some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be of manipulating people into thinking that they have mental disabilities and giving them lots of drugs that makes them go out in a coma for almost over 80 days. And they give them drugs and pump them through drugs, and then they keep running recordings through their heads. But we're going to get more into that. But let's lead into Project Artichoke. All right, an artichoke. Let's just talk about this for a second. Artichoke has many layers, just like the brain. So that's probably why they came up with the thing, Project Artichoke. You have to pull away a layer and layer at a time to get to the purpose of manipulating the mind. I hope that makes a lot of sense to everybody. They would use truth serum and hypnosis and LSD. Steve, there was also a CIA memo back in 1953 about MK Ultra, stating that they needed voluntary people to come in there. And what that leads me to wonder about is things like the assassination of Robert Kennedy, Sirhan Sirhan. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah. You're bringing in people, and they think that they're voluntarily. Like, there's this one story back in May 1953. The CIA brought in these soldiers, about 6 soldiers, believing that they were going to be helping with getting rid of the flu, and they were going to be like some kind of vaccine. They were all brought inside this one room, and droplets were placed on their arm, about 10 on each side. But they didn't know that the drug was sarin that was being put inside them. They probably didn't even know what sarin was. And they said, whatever you do, do not take off the mask. They were put on face masks for like a gas chamber type mask, and they were locked inside of a room. They told them, do not remove that mask at least for a good half an hour. Now, these guys started getting claustrophobia, and they were freaking out. And finally, they let him out. And one guy said, he goes, man, that was the best. When I got out of there, I never lived life so better. Because I thought I was going to die. It's a very interesting story. And then I think about things like the Sirhan, how people are getting manipulated. Steve, would you like to touch on that at all?
I think that's kind of it's kind of a touchy subject. So they were going in for like a flu vaccine?
Yeah, they were being told. Now, remember, these are young soldiers. So they're being told, hey, we want you to help out with the flu vaccine. We want to cure the flu. Would you like to help us out? Oh, yeah, being a young guy thinking that, hey, I'm going to help everybody out. So they went out there and they did that, but sarin was being put in their system, and they put them at the highest dose to see what effect that would have on them. And that was May of 1953. A guy by the name of Ken Earl, he was the subject in that. I believe he was with the Royal Navy, or he was part of the Royal Army or something. And he, like he said, real point to the experiment was to see the highest dose that they could do to be given to a human being. I mean, so you're going to go at the highest instead of probably gradually going up to see what goes on. Man, you go right away, right to that highest dose. That's insane.
Well, that goes back to, like, you know, I hate talking about Nazi Germany, but that goes back to Joseph Mengele. That guy was sick. His whole thing was, you know, what is the maximum pain I can give to somebody, and what is the minimum love that a human being can have and still function. The guy was about, you know, he was very curious about how do I get complete control over somebody. No morals at all. It's very sick.
Yeah, it is. It's very sick. And supposedly, Mengele, he was, I believe you're the one who told me that he somehow was being utilized by the American government, and they gave him a different name to help out with this. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. So this is a conspiracy theory, right? A lot of this stuff that we talk about today will kind of teeter on conspiracy and truth, because a lot of this was disclosed. But a lot of things with MKUltra remain hidden. But there's a group of people who believe that Dr. Mengele did not die, and that instead, through Project Paperclip, which is the project where a lot of these scientists came from Germany over to U.S., that he was given a new identity, Dr. Green, and he headed up part of the administration of MKUltra within the CIA. Again, that is not confirmed like some of the other things that we're going to talk about tonight, things like SubProject 68 and Monarch. This is more of a kind of more on the fringe. A lot of people believe that that's what happened, though.
Right, and like it wasn't just Germany to America. Also, Russia was doing their thing. China was doing their thing. Korea was doing their thing. After the Korean War, there was hundreds of soldiers that were still captured by the Koreans, and I guess they, once again, you don't know if this is true or not, but they were tortured, mind controlled, and then they were killed. So what kind of mind control were they putting them through, and how long of a duration were they going through this process? And like we talked about, were they using drugs? Were they using just physical torture? But any which way, you can do some kind of mind control to these people, and then eventually they just killed them. You know, like if they were just cattle or something like that.
Right. And that was one of the reasons why we went into it in 1953. We had just ended the Korean War, and we were wary of Russia doing these experiments, China, North Korea. I'm curious if this stuff still goes on today, and we'll get into that later tonight.
Sure. Now, you know what? You want to touch off with starting off the story?
Yeah.
Okay. Please, proceed.
Okay. So, talk a little bit about one of the MKUltra projects that were going on. They had several, like 150 different experiments that happened that is known about, and probably others that happened that we will never know about. But one of the projects was SubProject 68, and this is where about 50 patients came to the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal. Mm-hmm. And one of those patients was a man by the name of Louis Weinstein. And Louis went in because he had severe anxiety, and he heard about this program and decided, to go and volunteer for it. And he was convinced to be put into a coma for 2 months. And while he was in that coma, he was given different narcotics and electroshock therapy 3 to 4 times a day.
That's crazy.
And
3-4 times a day, these people were given shock therapy.
Now, usually during that time between this was in between 1957 and 1964. I think this was early on in the late 50s when Louis was a patient or a subject there. They had many others up until 1964. Mm-hmm. But basically, the norm for anxiety was electroshock 3 to 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. They were doing this 3 to 4 times a day, and giving him narcotics. They were giving him PCP, methamphetamine, and LSD. What happened is that when they brought him back into consciousness 2 months after, he was like a child. He couldn't remember any of his past. He could barely deal with the present. And like a lot of these folks, and you get into it, where they had to be like taught basic functions all over again. Louis went back, and his son, who's actually a doctor at Stanford University, his name is Dr. Harvey Weinstein. What an unfortunate name to have, by the way.
Yeah.
But his name is Dr. Harvey Weinstein. He's the son of Louis Weinstein. There's a YouTube video out there of him talking about his father's ordeal. Anybody interested in the subject of SubProject 68 should check this out. He talks about how his dad was not even his dad anymore, and all the issues that his father had after this. And, you know, this whole SubProject 68, they have this thing called psychic driving. Like, the whole idea behind this experiment was they wanted to put people into this state where they could reboot their brain. And they do it through, you know, basically creating an environment where the patient is unable to move, unable to do anything. They put them in a coma. They give them all these psychotropic drugs, and they force them to listen to recordings. And in that video, if you do go onto YouTube and look this up, you'll hear a sample of that recording. And you'll hear, basically, imagine this. You're in a coma, and you're forced to listen to a tape recording that says, why?
Right. Now, you know what?
Repeatedly.
Right. There was a guy who was also, just so ladies and gentlemen, you all know, there was many subjects who were doing this. One guy believed, because they kept playing it, whereas you killed your mother. They put him in this induced coma and kept playing. His mother's alive. And his mother's alive. And they kept playing, you killed your mother. You killed your mother. And you wake up and you're like, holy shit, I killed my mom. I mean, that's just horrible. I mean, that's just horrible. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just, you know, it's just crazy.
It's horrible, right?
Yeah, it's just horrible, these stories.
I mean, this guy, so the man who did this, who had this project, was SubProject 68, his name is Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron. And he did these experiments at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal. He had this lady, a doctor, who came to study under him. Her name was Dr. Mary Morrow. And basically, he convinced her to become a subject in the project as well.
Dr. Cameron, right?
Dr. Cameron, right.
He's the Evan, what was his name? Elam or Evan or something like that?
It was Donald Ewan Cameron.
Ewan.
Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron. And he convinced this Dr. Mary Morrow to be part of his research. So she did. And anyway, she was electroshocked. She was drugged daily. And in the end, she lost 10 years of her memory. In 10 years, she can't recollect. And you'll see, if you do go and check this stuff out on YouTube, there's actually a video of her talking about it, about what a sick individual this Dr. Cameron was.
You know,
and Dr. Cameron, by the way, knew what he was doing was wrong. Dr. Cameron was part of he was part of the trials of Nuremberg. He
was also hired by the CIA. He was making, now remember, this is back in the 1940s. He was making something, they said, like $64,000 extra a year by doing this. So he was getting paid by them and had a regular salary to do the CIA's work for them.
Yep.
So that's,
full range.
Yeah, and you wonder, man, if this stuff is still going on today. I mean, it's a scary thought, right?
So they say this stuff only went on between 1953 and 1973.
My ass.
But yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later tonight.
Right. So go ahead, carry on.
Yeah. So it's kind of a crazy thing. This guy was just I would say I call him a sick puppy. To be able to do this to people. He did it to over 50 patients. And actually, these patients later on tried to sue the CIA.
In 1985, wasn't it? 1985?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing a lawsuit.
Yeah, and the government of Canada said, we're behind you, And for some odd reason, the government of Canada sort of said, never mind.
And didn't happen. Get out of here, man.
They too were probably doing their own experiments, but or were compromised in some way.
Right.
So these folks never saw any sort of justice in regards to what was done to them.
Yeah, because take for instance that son of that guy you were talking about. He went through a lot of emotional things because he never had a father around him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. One minute you're playing catch with your dad or this or that, or you're used to the way your dad does things every single day, taking care of you, or your mother, and they come home after 90 days with a blank stare on their face, such is the case of a lady by the name of Linda McDonald. Linda McDonald. All right, so this lady, Linda McDonald, she went to that institute, and she was being suffered with depression. So they put her in a coma for 86 days. 86 days of LSD and other chemicals. When in the video that I was looking at the video today, and the video she states back in 1990 something in the video that she had to learn how to use the washroom again. That's horrible. And then when they took her back to her house, she didn't know anybody. Can you imagine being a mother, okay? And all of a sudden, you're having a little.
She had like 5 kids.
I don't know how many, but I know she had some kids. But you know that all women, they go through a postpartum, which is already hard enough on these ladies as it is, and they start doing depression. And then all of a sudden they go to a clinic where they think they're going to get help. They go in there and the guy says, we're going to put you in this induced coma. Trust me, we're going to take care of you. And what they're doing is they gave her over 100 electric shock treatments within that 86-day period at 4 times the amount of a normal thing that you're only supposed to do once or twice a week. And then you wake up and you don't know how to even use the washroom. That's sad and pathetic.
They were basically formatting the brain, right?
Yes.
Like erasing everything.
Kind of like how you, just so everybody knows, he's a computer guy. Just how you wipe a computer clean.
Yeah.
You take everything out of it, and now you got to start all over again. That's the way that these scientists in this, what we're talking about, that's their thought. There's no emotion involved. It's all about the scientific what happens. What if? Well, I'm going to tell you what if. You ruined a whole bunch of lives. Because it was evil. That thought is evil. I'm sorry if I had a rant on that, but that's evil, man.
You know what's more evil? These were voluntary subjects. What's pretty evil when we get into the involuntary subjects.
Well, I wouldn't say they were voluntary subjects. They were manipulated subjects.
Oh, they were totally manipulated. They were told, we got a program that's going to fix you.
Yeah.
And they were lied to.
Right.
They did volunteer for this, but there were others that never volunteered for MK Ultra.
Right, and there are some ones that weren't. Let's talk about that, Steve. Let's talk about Project. Go ahead, say it. You want to say it.
Well, I'll say the name after this.
No, you gotta say the name before it, man. Come on, you gotta say the name.
It's more fun to unveil the project name after we tell the details.
Okay, tell the details first. Go ahead.
All right, so this happened in New York and later in San Francisco. Later in the timeline of MK Ultra, there was another sub-project that occurred where the use of prostitutes were made to lure in men of influence. And these men of influence were involuntarily part of a mind control experiment. Basically, the prostitutes would take these men of influence into a hotel where there was a one-way mirror. On the other side of the one-way mirror were video recorders and the CIA, where they would record the encounters these men were having. Well, the men were slipped LSD or experimental truth serum, and sometimes they would smoke cannabis as well. And all in the meantime, they're being recorded. And they would have relations with these prostitutes, all being recorded. And as these drugs set in, the prostitutes would ask them questions to see if they would disclose some of their secrets to them, all being recorded.
Right.
And this project was called Operation Midnight Climax.
Midnight
I'm
Climax.
not kidding. This is something that, like, Michael Scott would call it, right, from The Office.
Right. I mean, it's... that is just that's a very good name, I'll tell you that. Midnight Climax.
Operation Midnight Climax.
Now, why couldn't I get a time machine and go back in time and get on this invitation?
I mean
sex
I could have named
drugs.
these, you know.
I mean,
it's something we would have named it.
Now, you were saying, I know we were talking about earlier, because I know you were saying about it, is that there was another guy who was doing outside work on his own, who was part of the CIA, who was using these videos to basically blackmail people, which they weren't supposed to do.
No, there was a contractor agent, George White, who took the footage, and he then circled back to blackmail his men.
Right.
This project was crazy. They started in New York, and then they moved into San Francisco. And it became like a party at the CIA, right, where they had no restraint on what they could do. And so they would start just kidnapping anybody, not just people of influence.
Right.
They would just lure people in from the bar and pump them full of drugs and do these things. And it was out of control.
Yeah, that's but it's a party, man. It's a party. And, you know, it was just basically to see the effects of what it would have on certain individuals, because they also wanted to pump them with truth serum. They wanted to see what kind of information they could get out of some of these guys and girls, even though it didn't have anything to do with what. It was basically the goal to see what they can get out of people by talking truth serum.
I wonder if they ever got that to work. Their experimental truth serum.
I don't know. You know. I know there is a truth serum. I know they have that. I forget the name of it. I think there's actually 2 or 3 of them, but I do forget the names of them. But what other stories of MK Ultra do you think we should talk about?
Well, there's a few, but probably one of the more talked about ones is Project Monarch.
Okay.
And this was an experiment where another sub-project within MK Ultra, right? This is all about, there's like 150 different sub-projects that were going on. Project Monarch, it gets a little bit into paranormal a little bit, but only for a moment. But it was basically mostly about multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder. They didn't call it that back then. They called it multiple personality.
Okay.
And what they would do is they would take subjects that were babies, right? And these children would be allowed to bond only with one individual, you know, like an adult. And then at 2 years of age, the bonded individual or bonded person would subject them to trauma, usually by the means of torture. And that would just traumatize the child so much that in order to cope, they would develop a natural protection mechanism of splitting their personality into 2. And they would create a personality that could deal with the trauma and allow the child to sort of like have this other sort of slave personality.
So would it be something where like we're trying to make a killer?
Yes. They were trying to do this.
Whereas one personality is the true personality of the person, and the second personality is something of not of emotion, just of act.
It's a traumatized aspect of their personality that's programmed to act based on the trigger.
With no emotion.
And, right. So when they would be torturing these kids, they would be constantly showing them a particular image, or they would have a sound or song playing, or a key word. And that would act as a trigger later down the road.
Kind of like what I was talking about earlier with the Sirhan thing with Robert Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
You get a guy who's a Manchurian candidate, and a code word or a color or some kind of phrase or a picture, like you said, activates this thing inside the mind after them being broken down, being wiped clean, reactivated, and a new process placed inside of their brain. Does that make sense? So
exactly.
And then what happens is, now I have a killer with no emotion, no thought, just directive activity, who is going to take care of the action that we put forth in his brain, as in Sirhan, who went and killed Robert Kennedy, but does not recollect any of this.
Right. But here's what's so sinister about this, is that in order for this to work, the process has to be repeated over and over again.
Yes.
And so what happens is that bonded individual, that person that they trust, who subjected them to torture during the process of exposing to an image or a keyword or song, would then continue to act as if nothing had happened, continue to be loving to them. And what would happen is it would cause the slave personality, which was their original personality, to sort of have this amnesia about what happened.
Right.
And they would repeat this over and over, with the torture intensifying, and the same image, the same trigger, sound, what have you, and the same sort of hypnosis loop they were putting them under. They were telling them, giving them instruction and so forth.
Right.
And then they would continue back to this loving relationship, where they would just sort of create this split personality. And whenever they were exposed to the triggering stimulus after a while, like Pavlov's dog, they would go into this master sort of personality that was programmed to do a particular action, such as assassinating somebody. It all started off as an experiment. They didn't necessarily create assassins right away. They tortured a lot of people to get this technology to work.
Right. Now, could we, or not we as you and I, or could they have actually done it in reverse, whereas you had people who had major psychological problems, who were emotionally distant from people, to then put them in the same state, but I'm not saying at the same effect of, the torturing part, but could you change someone's psychological profile?
Without torture?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Can you imagine you could
there's always a
John Wayne Gacy and all of a sudden, you change his whole way of thinking?
Probably
it's a thought,
would have to apply torture. So torture and trauma play a very important role in this, because what it does is it activates the individual's fight response, right? Their reptilian brain gets involved in it. And at that core level of the brain, that's where you can start to influence the higher brain to create a split in consciousness in order to deal with that trauma. But you have to get down to the root of the reptilian brain, which is going to respond to torture. It's going to respond to negative things that it needs to adapt to in its environment.
Now you said
I don't know if they can do it in a loving way, is what I'm saying.
Now you said reptilian brain.
Yes. You know what I'm talking about? There's like your higher brain that we use, and then there's like they call it the reptilian brain. It's like your cortex, the small part in the back of your brain.
Do you know where I'm leading to?
Reptilians.
Shall we bring it into aliens?
We could bring in aliens, but I want to touch a little bit more on this.
Okay, please.
Just a little bit, because we get into the question of, does MK Ultra still exist in some way, right, today?
Sure.
There's still mind control experiments going on, and how would they have evolved since 1973? Because in 1973, the program was said to have ended, all right? But then you get into something called mass mind control, and that would be the next step, wouldn't it? Because MK Ultra dealt with individual level mind control.
Kind of like Facebook? Kind of like Facebook?
Oh, well, we can get into that, but we're on the Facebook platform.
I'm just talking about sales of stuff, buy Coca-Cola or something.
So we're not saying like that Facebook is owned by a CIA, right?
No,
we're not going to talk about that.
We're not.
Let's not. That's not true, everybody.
No.
It's so untrue. It's a myth, as Jerry Nadler would say.
All right, moving on.
Okay, so all right, so mass mind control, right? And then you get into Jonestown, right?
Yes.
Jim Jones and the People's Temple.
Yes.
Now, this gets freaky, because this was a mass mind control where you had 1,000 people convinced to kill themselves to end their lives. How do you do that? Guyana is where the massacre happened, and Guyana was basically, there was a CIA-influenced coup that happened there prior to Jim Jones bringing the People's Temple over to that part of Venezuela, right? And there's a lot of links to the CIA and Jim Jones. And matter of fact, you had a U.S. representative that was killed during that massacre, right? Leo Ryan. He was gunned down in 1978 during the Jonestown massacre, right? So he was told that Americans, were being held against their will, and he went down there to see if that was true, and he was killed. And the thing about Leo Ryan is he was in the CIA's face constantly. He would drop in over at Langley unexpectedly, without any warning at all, just to interrogate the CIA, to ask some questions about the mind control programs that they were doing.
Really?
He was a thorn in their side, and kind of lucky for them, he was killed by Jonestown people, right?
Or he may have uncovered something, huh?
Or was he killed by them?
Or was
maybe he was killed by the CIA. We don't know. There's conspiracy theories about that.
It's funny that you say that, okay? Because there's a lot of people who were part of MK Ultra, who were in the military, and we're talking generals and majors, who, for some reason, they fell out a window, or they jumped out of a window. And they say, "Oh, it's suicide." Oh, really? Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, he that guy that you're talking about, he fell out a window, right? But the autopsy showed that he was beaten beforehand. Before he fell out the window.
They said that he had trauma to his head. He had some marks to his chest.
His name was Frank Olson, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, Frank. Was he a general? Was he a general?
He was working with one of the guys who started the Operation Midnight Climax, actually. Sidney
Hold on a
Gottlieb.
second. Stop. Midnight Climax. All right,
Midnight Climax. Sidney Gottlieb was his boss, and it was said that this guy Frank Olson was the subject of experiments by Sidney Gottlieb before all this happened. That he would drug him and do different things to him, and the guy was beat up badly and drugged before he committed suicide. Supposedly committed suicide. So the guy who brought you Midnight Climax,
Climax.
may have been responsible for his death, according to some.
You know, you never know. He could have been one of those guys in that room.
Right.
You know?
So you get into like mass mind control, right? And then you get into like, what do cults do? Because MK Ultra between 1953 and 1973, they focused on individual mind control. But I think what happened after that is they got much more advanced in what they were able to do, and they started to focus on mass numbers of people at the same time. And then you get into cult conditioning, or even what Jonestown was a death cult. So, death cult conditioning.
Right.
How do you do that, right? And some of the things in order to do that is that for cult conditioning to happen, you have to make everyone the same in some way.
And it's done through eyes and ears.
Right. And it can be something as simple as having a uniform, maybe having people shave heads.
Yes.
Or, if you go way back in time, wear a mask. Now, I'm not saying anything, but these are some of the things that have been used in the past and in current cults, where you have to make everybody the same.
Yes.
Right? You have to take away their individuality. You have to make them unrecognizable as an individual, and instead part of a bigger community.
Right, right.
The other thing you need to do is that you use other members of the cult to socially condition the other members of the cult. So members of the cult keep each other in line.
Through physical
if you step
abuse.
out of line, the members of the cult will punish you through humiliation and shame, which is a type of psychological torture. Some of the same stuff used in MK Ultra. You've got to create a traumatized subject and use torture to do it. And one of the other things that you do in occult conditioning is that you use trauma and isolation to make the person get into that reptilian brain reaction, right, where they start to split into a cult personality, and you keep them away from their families, right? You sort of keep them
you take
isolated.
them out of the equation. You take them out of their natural life equation.
Right. And you constantly create trauma, and then sometimes you lift it. You might say, okay, it's ice cream day, have an ice cream, or go out to the lakefront, it's okay. They sort of lift the trauma for a moment, and then they bring it back repeatedly.
Right.
Now, the question is, did MK Ultra end in 1973, or is it still continuing in some form today, and did they advance into a mass mind control instead of an individual mind control? And if they did, what might that look like? I don't have the answers to that, Neal.
You know what? That's actually something that I think would be another great show about modern age mind control. I think that would be something that we definitely have to reflect into the future. Or at least bring into the future of a discussion. But what I'd like to talk about right now is a little bit of the paranormal and aliens, but stay on mind control for 1 second. I just want to explain something. Mind control, what happens if also the paranormal, as in the supernatural, as in ghosts and spirits, possession? Sometimes when people are possessed, technically, and they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, as in like Amityville Horror or the true story of The Exorcist, someone else is driving. So is that some kind of mind control by an outside source?
Yeah, it would be. You know what's interesting about that? In the old days, they say cast those demons out, and nowadays they say integrate those personalities into the individual.
Wow, that's
right?
very interesting. That's deep right there, dude. I have to be honest with you, that's pretty deep. But it's something I have to think about. Like, let's lead right into the aliens, and let's talk about Betty and Barney Hill and mind control real quick. Betty and Barney Hill, they saw something. We did a show all about Betty and Barney Hill, but we're just going to talk a little bit about it. They're influenced when this alien craft came down to almost like voluntarily, with no physical altercations. They're walking with these aliens onto a craft. So some way or another, there's some kind of mind control going on where they're subservient to these beings. It's very weird. So it is something else of a mind control. Would you agree with that?
I mean, think about it, Neil. If you were abducted by an alien and you're like naked on the table and these things are looking at you, what's your reaction going to be? Subservience? Or are you going to get up and try to fight?
You're going to, you're sometimes, I believe that sometimes you're going to be taken out of your normal personality. And when, let's say you are naked on a table and an alien is looking at you and 4 or 5 of them, you're out of your control factor. And everything's just changed in your life. And you don't know what's going to happen. Either you are going to get up and you're going to try to beat somebody up, or you're just going to lay there. And, out of complete fear. So could also, some of this mind control, because we're going to lead into aliens, could have happened for things like the Roswell crash, through technology. How were these aliens doing it? Were they doing it through a psychological, some kind of psych, where they were able to talk to people through their minds and able to just dampen their emotions and just make them like almost if they were on some kind of a drug where they were just subservient to the actions that they wanted them to do. It's very interesting. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to lead right into aliens, if that's okay with you, Steve.
Yeah. Aliens are and mind control and aliens in general. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to lead into something that I want to continue for next week, because it's such a big subject, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to, for next week, talk about the classification of all these supposed 160 species of aliens. Me personally, I've only heard that I recognize like 3 or 4, like the Greys and the Nordics and stuff like that. But there was a book that came out, and I'm going to get into that. But I want to start with the early history of over 1200 BC, when the Egyptians in the Sahara Desert, basically they found a lot of writings in there in the pyramids. And one of the things that they found this bird that it was a wooden bird. It was a sculpture. And what they believe is that this sculpture of this bird is actually what the Egyptians were looking at as a glider. Now, I have to stop and say I don't agree with that. If you look it up 1200 BC, the Sahara Desert in Egypt. It has in the picture 2 eyes, like if it was a bird. What happens if you're not thinking that deep, that you think it's a glider from the past? What happens if it was just a bird? Some kid drew, or maybe a teacher drew so that kids could see it. I'm not trying to say that there wasn't alien stuff, but this thing kind of, I looked at it and I go, maybe it's just a bird, man. It's,
It's a drawing?
It's a carving.
An actual, sculpture.
Yes, it's a sculpture. You know how you go to the toy store, you find one of those little gliders from Toys R Us, and you throw it and it just flies through the air. It's like that, but it's a little bit thicker. But modern day America, let's get into modern day America. Reports of colonists. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about is the Zuni Pueblos, Indians. Okay, back before colonists came in here, Zuni Pueblo Indians saw these star beings, what they would call star beings. And that was the name that they were using, star beings. Let me just double check my thing here so I get this right. Yeah, the star beings, and they were very inviting to these people, and they put a lot of things on the walls and on mountains and stuff like that about these star beings, which was very, very interesting. They are very welcoming. Back in January of 1762, when colonists started coming to America, they also started talking about aliens that they started seeing. They said they would see bright lights in the sky. So we're going back as far as 1200 BC. Then I'm trying to bring it a little bit forward into American history, but it starts with a real American history with the Sunni Indians, and that they took a lot of pictures of stuff on the walls. They drew pictures on the walls, and then right into the colonists in January of 1762, where they said that they saw these bright lights in the sky. Why would they make this up? It makes no sense to me. Something did happen, like any story that's ever told, though, and like the stories that we tell when we do our tours and stuff, or our documentaries. All stories start with something. Doesn't mean it's complete truth, but there is an ounce, or 2 or 3 ounces. But let's lead into the Blue Planet Project book. Now, this is not Project Blue Book. The Blue Planet Project book is different than Project Blue Book. So this book was supposedly designed to show 160 different species. The man who supposedly the author of this book was a guy by the name of Jefferson Souza, which they've never ever been able to find, Mr. Jefferson Souza. They say back in 1990 or something like that, he was either in hiding or the government hid him away. But they're saying that this guy, Jefferson Souza, is the author to this book, the Blue Planet Project book. Now, I found this very interesting because I was looking up and I was trying to pay attention to a lot of it. One of the things that they talk about this book. This book spans over 35 years of this man. He's basically talking about all the different species, the reason behind alien abduction, the reason behind cattle mutilation, for all these why somebody's abducted, what is the reasons for them being abducted. What happened is back in July 8th, 1947, 2 years to the day, 1945, just in New Mexico, Trinity nuclear test occurred. Okay, so could that Trinity nuclear test that occurred threw up a signal saying, hey, look where we're at now, and we have this kind of a power? So then you flash forward to 1947, and then you go to Roswell, New Mexico, where there was a crash site of supposedly an alien aircraft. Now, I know a ton of people have talked about this, and supposedly bodies were found. And so what they talk about in this book is all the different project things, like Project Red Light, where it was military was trained to find these things, these spacecrafts, and do reverse technology.
Engineering.
Yeah, reverse engineering. Thank you, Steve. And then they had a Delta team, which was Men in Black, or you could call them the Umbrella Team, or Umbrella Squad, whatever they want to be called. Supposedly these Men in Black who walk around and they're trying to find alien life that supposedly lives with us. And then you have what the heck's the name of it? MJ-12, Majestic, which is basically comprised of scientists and government officials. And this is like the top clearance for everything that is alien. Nothing gets past them without them telling you this is okay or that's not okay. That's the only way I can basically say it is. And one of the things was, let me just flip my little page here, is that MJ-12, they would basically, through Eisenhower, he's the one who actually started it, and he would basically give the clearance if certain things were going to happen. And I was reading the outlines of this book, and this paperwork on this project, it details a whole lot of different things that happened, and it talks a little bit about the alien races, which we'll definitely be getting into next week. But Steve, what do you have on it?
Well, you talk about this whole thing about the Trinity project, where we blew up a nuclear bomb, right?
Yes.
And do you think that, and this is something that I think about every now and then, is have we had first contact already and just don't know?
Right.
Just like MK Ultra was going on and nobody knew about it until it was declassified somewhat, forced. Some of it came out. A lot of stuff was burned, right, from MK Ultra. But if we had first contact already in 1945, then think about what would that mean with Roswell, 2 years later, after first contact, Do you think, there might be secret wars that happen between us and...
Well, they do touch upon that, of basically like the Star Wars technology. Now, I remember seeing videos from NASA, and I'm sure you've seen it, where you see this craft, it's coming in near the Earth, and it's a slowly descending down or across, and all of a sudden something's shot up from the Earth. And then before
stuff from like the Space Shuttle and International Space Station footage, right? The live feeds?
Right. Then all of a sudden, this thing, which is going one direction nice and slow, all of a sudden changes direction and shoots right back out because it doesn't want to get hit by this, what looks like to probably be a missile. Or it could be a laser. I don't know. I wasn't there. I just saw the video. But
and then the feeds go out after that sometimes, right? Like you see something and like the feeds like scramble and I've seen a few like that.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I want to get into next week definitely more about all these different alien races and what we're going to touch in, and we're going to talk about the North Pole and support the Nordic aliens. We've talked about that before, but very shortly. But I want to get into that. Yeah, in the North Pole.
Are we getting to Santa at all? Or?
You want to get into Santa? Santa and the aliens. but there's some
MK Ultra
supposedly,
and Santa.
Yeah, supposedly these they have bases in the North Pole, and what happened was originally Germany tried to get out there to conduct a base out there. They believed that there was something out there. I know that there was something with Russia as well, and of course America. Now, you can't find out what's going on in the North Pole. Why? Simple. It's the North Pole, ladies and gentlemen. It's cold as hell. And you're not going to really find out too much. Nobody is going to get on a plane, get on a boat, and go out there and tell us, hey, man, there's a base down there because it's too damn cold. You're not going to figure it out. And then what happens if there is? We'll talk about also about submerged bases. That are possibly underneath the North Pole. There are also supposedly tunnels that reach across from many oceans to lakes that alien ships pop out of. And there's alien technology out there. I don't know if that's true, but it's something that's interesting to me, which I think it would be a great subject, of course, for next week when we talk about the aliens. But I'd like to ask Steve, what else would you like to talk about aliens tonight?
Psychic abductions.
Okay,
so, do these abductions happen in the physical world, or are they psychic abductions? And this is something that we might need to bridge over into next week about, but I think I bring it up right now because it has to do kind of with mind control, the subject earlier today, and aliens. There have been accounts where groups of people have been abducted at a single time. They're driving in a car, and they see a bright light, and they pull in somewhere, and then they have this memory of being abducted.
Right.
And then they wake up, right? And they're somewhere other than where they thought they were abducted. For example, this story of a group of people, I think it was out in the UK, they were driving down a road, and they pull over into a gas station. When they woke up, they were just out in the country. no gas station. And was the idea of them being at a gas station part of a psychic abduction? Was that, like, were somehow, did they imagine a group hallucination that they pulled into a gas station?
Well, you know what? I kind of see what you're saying, but I know a story of I think it was like five guys in this big rowboat, and they were out fishing all night long, and supposedly they saw this bright light, and it was coming down close to them, and they recounted being abducted, but after some time they recounted with themselves of being put up in a spaceship like that. How could someone be psychically, almost like what you're saying, on a lake?
So the thing is that they're not actually abducted at all. They're not physically brought into a spacecraft. They only, in their mind, experience that. It's a mind control thing. There's a famous example of this where this lady was, there were three individuals staying over in a house, and two women, one man. And the two women shared one of the rooms, and they had twin beds. And the gentleman was in a different room. And this is all based on the recollection of the gentleman. He hears this cry, this scream come from the ladies. So he goes into the room, and he sees a blue light and one of the women sitting halfway upright, kind of suspended in the air, and her mouth open, right? Mm-hmm. And the other woman in the corner, scared, So he runs over to the other woman, and he's like, "What's going on?" And he goes, "I woke up, and she was talking about, why is there a helicopter flying over the house? And I didn't hear a helicopter." And she said, "No, there's a helicopter flying over the house." And all of a sudden I saw this blue light, and she sat up, and she's just like that. And then the lady starts talking. The one who's suspended, she's talking and pointing to the foot of the bed and up in front of her. They can't really hear what she's saying. And then the blue light disappears, the lady falls into the bed. And they asked her what happened. And she said she was taken aboard this craft, and she was talking to aliens. But she never physically left the room, which gets into the whole concept of, are alien abductions actually physically happening, or are they happening psychologically?
Or spiritual?
Spiritual or psychic abduction? Is it a mind control type of experience, or is it something that just happens? Is it a mental problem? Or is it some phenomenon that's actually being forced to happen, and there's some technology out there that allows for it to happen?
Or what if, all right, like, let's say there's many cases of abduction that happens inside of someone's bedroom, and they have the feeling of going through a wall. What happens if it's not physically, but what happens if their soul's being taken out and brought into another dimension through something or going through a wall? And
that's interesting.
Then being brought onto a ship, but in spirit form, not a physical form. Like, let me just try to say,
like an interdimensional perception.
Right here, let me finish. Say you're laying next to your wife, okay, and at no time is she interrupted, because what's happening is your soul is coming out of the body and being brought onto the ship in that form. What happens if it's something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And the wife or the husband doesn't even know that this is going on, because the body is still there, but either through a dimensional pull from these beings. Let's talk about when spirits come through walls, or they all of a sudden show up. What happens if aliens really are ghosts?
Or the demons.
Or the demons. Because how Just so you know, they say there's like 160 species. What happens if there's a species that looks like a shadow person?
How many angels deflected or defected from heaven when
Lucifer?
During the Nephilim, yeah.
The Nephilim. Well, that's totally a different show, man. But we'll touch on that for a second. So let's talk about angels for a second, okay? And
Sure.
We'll talk about angels and extraterrestrials. Now, there's a whole bunch of, what kind of glass pictures are those in churches? What are those called?
Mosaics?
Mosaics? Okay. There have been ones that are much older where these pictures show what looks like to be a craft up in the sky where there's a picture of Joseph or Mary or Jesus. What if, and what I tell you before is the higher G, lower G, the God concept. You got your large G and your small G concept. Whereas God the Creator, there's a God. But then there's a lower G who then all of a sudden, you know, that race starts learning. And then before you know it, they're a lower G that becomes a larger G. And then they create another G, which could be us. And now because like I talked about before, and I know I harped on this before, is what happens if we are eventually going to be that next level that gets to that large G? And now we're God, because now we're creating clones. So now what are we doing? We are creating humans. Am I right or wrong?
Well, yeah, we are cloning human-animal hybrids. Actually, there have been papers that publicly, like, this is not a joke, right? They're actually growing like human organs inside of pigs for transplant.
Yes.
Right. There's a lot of stuff that's going on right now where we are beginning to, on this physical plane, be able to replicate a copy of our physical selves. Right. We're able to genetically engineer that stuff. There's actually talk about AI and integrating the human
yes.
mind with AI. So there's many levels of this replication, this lower G sort of thing happening at the human level. What's interesting, I was listening to a guy talk this week about how there's, say, like, if you're religious and you believe in God, and that's something I believe in. I believe you believe in it too.
Yes.
And you have a discernment is something that God gives you, right? The ability to discern good and evil, right? It's sort of like a psychic knowing, if you will. Mm-hmm. But the lower G offers you ESP, which is a different form of discernment. It's a copy of discernment, but it's a different kind of knowing, a different kind of telepathy, if you will, right? And so I'm curious if you get into, like, the fallen Nephilim, are they lower G? Maybe they don't have...
Were they another alien race that they talk about, like, take for instance the Nordics, and I think it was the Greys, Zeti Verticuli system. I hope I'm saying that right. And supposedly they had a war over there. What happens if the large
Zeta?
Zeta, yeah. And what happens if the creatures that came over here, which were a lower G, but to us it was a large G? I sometimes confuse myself. And they also they created something here, but it was due to a war and a falling out of a war between alien races. I mean, I know I'm getting a little deep here, and I get it, but
we could go deeper too. You get into, like, blood types, right? And you get into the proteins that make up blood types. So they say that there's an original blood type that, you know, was created in the Garden of Eden, and then that there's, like, that lineage, and then the Nephilim came down, and they interbred. right?
Yep,
with
and that made
humans.
the giants. That made the giants.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and if you look at blood today, you get like A, B, O, and then you get the RH negative, RH positive. What RH positive is there are certain protein structures that are around the blood that are not in the RH negatives. Negative means it's not there, right? RH positive means these proteins are in the cell. And then you look at the O blood type and compare it to the A, and the A has different antigens or proteins on it that aren't on O, and B has different proteins, antigens on it that aren't on A or O, and AB has a combination of A and B antigen proteins.
Dude, you are getting so deep. You are getting so deep.
No, this is a little bit deep. I'm going to end it quickly, but I just want to say these proteins are actually nanotechnology, right? And they get into the idea that these aliens were changing our DNA. They were altering it.
Yes. All right. Now, let me just stop you for a second. Take, for instance, abductions. They say that certain alien races, the reason why the abductions, like you're getting into different blood types and this and that.
Yep.
What happens if they're trying to sort out because they want to continue on with their race and they have to sort out A, B, and C person, human beings, to find that one blood type or that one certain thing that actually helps enhance their life to continue? Could that really be what they do say is because of alien abductions that they're searching for something that's supposed to continue on with their life? Or like they have talked about, certain minerals that are in the earth that they need. As in gold. They need gold for whatever reason. I need gold.
The Anunnaki, yeah.
Yeah, the Anunnaki. These are all just...
Well,
I'll tell you
one more level deep. One more level deep just for fun. For the kids listening,
for the kids.
Is the simulation theory that this is just a computer program or a sort of a simulation, right? And so maybe these blood types are just variants in the program to see what happens, right? So it might not even be a physical thing. This all could be a mental construct or a computer simulated construct. And we're artificial intelligence within it.
What happens if we are? And what we define our things as in things like blood, DNA. That's our
information.
word for it.
It's information.
But in their thing, it's their technology. Whereas us, this is just us being human beings, it's blood and this and that. But what happens to them is that we're probably just part of what their technology is. Yeah, of whatever they built. And it's like if I go and I build a little robot and I use all these little chips and this and that and I make it in there, well, to that bot, that's what keeps that thing alive.
We're self-replicating biochemical robots created by aliens.
Wow.
No, by the Nephilim aliens. Who knows? Who knows?
I'm gonna leave you at this, Steve. Is that there are so many different theories out there, and so much deep thought. Somebody was smoking something really good because there's a lot of deep thought out there, and it's just something you got to really, really think about. And man, I think today's conversation was really, really good on both of MK Ultra and talk about aliens. Next week, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to go on with a little bit more of aliens. And then the next week after, I have a pro wrestler coming on. We are going to...
What?
Yes.
You got a pro...
Yes, I got a pro wrestler. His name is Ivan Manson. He is going to be coming on the show, and we are going to talk about the conspiracies of many deaths of many wrestlers throughout the years and the tragic deaths of many wrestlers. Understand, I was a big wrestling fan back in the day, watching Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher and all that fun stuff. Hulk Hogan, yeah, brother. And we're going to have him on here, but next week we're definitely going to continue on with aliens because I think it's something that needs at least 2 shows as we went over the hour today. I want to thank Steve for coming on tonight. He did a great job as usual. I always enjoy talking to Steve. Let's listen to a little bit of alien music and let's phase out. And like I always say to you every single time, ladies and gentlemen, what I always say to everybody is have a good night, stay blessed, and as always, boo.
Boo.
Little alien music going out. I'm digging it. What do you think, Steve? You like that music?
Yeah. Send me a link.
I hope it can stay on Facebook Live. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Spirits by the Graveside. My name is Neil Gibbons as Steve Lineweber. Thank you for coming on tonight. And as usual, boo.
Peace out.
Peace out.